one thing I remember very well was this occupation that Jan and I went on in the year 2000. Well, it left from Recife. I in fact arrived a bit earlier than Jan and helped them on their, well, I accompanied them on their recruitment. And I remember sort of going around sitting on the back of little motorbikes, because they were on the back of this rather reckless driver. And we arrived in shanty towns, and really they didn't do a huge amount of preparation. They called a meeting, people came, and they said, look, we're organising an occupation in 3 days' time. If you're here at 3:30 in the morning, we're not going to tell you where, but we're going to take you to some land that is owned by a big landowner that's unproductive, and we're going to fight for land. We can't, it will be dangerous, they told the people then. We may face gunmen, but you may finish up owning a plot of land. And we went around to about 6 or 7 places, and people listened. But to tell you the truth, I was completely sceptical that people were actually going to participate, because it was clearly going to be dangerous. There was no guarantee. But then when we actually went on the night, there were people there, ready, waiting with their goods, weren't they, Jan? And,
yeah, I remember, actually, that really is something I remember, which was such a dramatic moment, because I waited with a group of these people, and they were, you know, men, women and children. I remember there was a funny old man who had his MST flag sort of ready to put outside his bit of land. And so everyone was terribly, and they had baskets and bags of things, and everyone was very keen. But then they had one member of the MST people with them, and he had a mobile phone. And he suddenly got the warning, look, hide, because the gunmen are coming. Nobody knew exactly who these gunmen were. We were going to, it was an area surrounded by sugarcane estates. And so then the atmosphere changed from this great sort of enthusiasm and happiness to fear. And I remember we all sort of scrabbled around and hid at the back of a building. And what really ran through my mind then so strongly, and we were hiding in a hedge in fact, was that it must have been like this when slaves were trying to escape during the time of slavery in Brazil, because there were massive escapes all over the place from different estates in Brazil, and it was the same thing, running away in the middle of the night, and you suddenly got this feeling that we were in that almost a similar situation. We were hiding from the bosses, we were running away, we just wanted a bit of land, a bit of freedom, yet we had to hide, and it was an incredible sensation somehow that we were being sort of carried back in time 200 years, and I felt, you know, I felt like I could feel what it was like to be searching for freedom, to be a slave, as these people were, slaves of unemployment and poverty and so on, but looking for their freedom and a better life.
The actual hunger of some of them was quite surprising, and you realise that when people are really very poor and they haven't got enough food for their families, then they will take these enormous risks to get a bit of land and to be able to cultivate food for their families. So we went with them there were various coaches, various buses picking people up, and one or two of them actually got stopped on the road by gunmen and didn't get to the land. That the group we were with actually got onto the land, but there were only about 30 families by then, and so we sort of went in and we did the normal thing of cutting down vegetation, constructing very simple huts and tents to sleep in with just poles and black plastic, and we spent the first rather uncomfortable night. And
very uncomfortable.
And Jan and I, being a bit worried about our own health, had brought sort of big bottles of water, but they didn't last very long because there were so many women with young babies, and we couldn't just drink this pure water ourselves. So we sort of we had to share it. Then of course, so we had to finish up actually drinking water from this rather dirty-looking stream. But after we'd spent the first night, about 10 in the morning, when some of the leaders of the occupation had actually gone back to Recife to see what had happened to the others, about 30 gunmen arrived in jeeps, parked, and then this great line of them marched towards the occupation. I mean, heavily armed men, And we were quite scared. And yet these women, and particularly the women actually, and the young children, just got themselves, formed a big row and just started shouting the MST slogans, and just stood there really determined. And I think we were both really scared the men were going to shoot. But when it came to it, there was such opposition that the men just went away and left the families to get on, and they continued building the camp.
But I think, because I think they realised then how organised they were. You know, they came expecting a rabble of people who'd give up and so on. And what they showed, what the men and women showed, was that they were an organised group, although they'd in fact only just come together. But they knew some of the slogans already, and they sort of formed a phalanx, and they were defending their patch.